Step 1, we're going to start with a high ponytail. This will be on top of the head at the back, and I wouldn't go any further back than Savannah's looks in this video. You're going to take your bow, and you're going to hold it upside down, and place the tails on top of the head, and then wrap the elastic around the ponytail like you normally would with a regular ponytail. Wrap it around as many times as you can, and then you're going to tuck the tails backwards with these prep bows just to make sure it stands up nice and tall. Now some of the bows are slightly different in shape, so you might choose to not tuck the tails backwards as long as it still stands up tall. Once the bow is in, you're going to flip the whole ponytail over, and you're going to take a small section, spray it first with hairspray. I think we missed that in this part of the video. And you're going to begin teasing at the very bottom, and slowly work your way up with the teasing until you're about halfway up the section. When we're working on this underneath part, it can look a little bit more rough than maybe our top layer will. And you can see as we get higher and higher up the strand, Radish is giving just a little bit of a push down to make sure there's not gaps in the tease. Once you get about halfway up, it should sort of look like it's able to stand up on its own. And then you can use your fingers to spread it out a little bit to try to mimic that high pony teased shape. Give it a good spray with hairspray, and then you're going to move on to the next section. Make sure the sections that you're taking are not too large. For the purposes of this tutorial, maybe we took sections that were a little bit bigger just to make sure that it wasn't too long. Give it a good spray with the hairspray, let it dry a second before you start teasing, and it'll hold even better. And we're going to do the exact same tease on this piece, starting at the bottom, working our way up the strand. How far you go will depend on the length of your athlete's hair as well. We want to make sure the bottom half stays smooth so that we can curl it at the end. So you can see Radish is just spreading out the tease with her fingers to mimic that dome shape of the poof, and give it a good spritz with hairspray in between. You're going to keep repeating these steps. So take a new small section, tease, spread it out with your fingers, hairspray before and after. Then once you get to almost about halfway through the hair, you can actually start taking from the left and right sides and sort of teasing in that direction to fill in the sides of the poof and not just the top. Once you've teased the first side piece, you want to use your fingers to spread it out onto the right side and then onto the left side to make sure that you're filling in those edges. You can smooth out the poof with your comb as you go if you feel like there's any large bumps that are starting to form. Just be careful not to brush out the teasing that you have put in. So now you'll see Radish moving over to the opposite side, and she's going to do the exact same thing, spreading out the tease with her fingers and just lightly combing to make sure that it's nice and smooth. Once you've tackled the left and right sides and the poof is starting to form, you can move back to the center and start teasing those middle strands to try to form the top of the poof. Sometimes it's nice to have your athlete hold their own bow forwards so that you can get the teasing nice and close to the base of the ponytail. So we're just repeating the teasing, spraying, and smoothing process. As you get closer to the end of the hair that's left, you want to make sure that your pieces are getting smoother and smoother, and you'll have slightly less teasing until you get to the end, just to make sure the end product doesn't look like there's bumps or any kind of tangled areas throughout. So again, Radish is grabbing small sections close to the end, teasing really close to the base, and this one will be kind of filling in a part of the side of the poof. As you go, you'll be able to see where there's more hair needed to give yourself that full looking poof. So lots of smoothing with the comb as you get close to the end, and it is sometimes helpful to hold the poof up with your hand as you spray it to kind of train it to stay up tall. On these end pieces, you'll see Savannah's holding her bow quite a bit forward so that Radish can get nice and close to the base of that ponytail to make sure there's no gap between the bow and the poof at the end. Lots of gentle combing and smoothing. Be careful not to comb too hard or put the comb too much into the poof to avoid losing the tease that you just worked so hard on. On the very last piece, you only want to tease a little bit. Put a little bit of hairspray and then make sure that it's covering as much of the top of the poof as you can. The goal of this last piece is to hide any little tangled areas and to make sure the hair looks evenly spread across the whole poof. You may need to go in with the comb and just fix those little edges to make sure that the sides look smooth all the way into the base of the head and that there's not any tanglies behind the bow. The nice thing about bows is they will help to hide any imperfections with the teasing. So here's what it should look like when you get close to the end. The very last thing we're going to do is add some curls with either a curling iron or curling wand, whatever you have. We're going to start from one end and curl our pieces inwards towards the middle of the head. We're going to only curl the bottom half of the section, and be careful that you're not pulling too hard because it can affect our volume of our tease. You may also choose to change the direction of the curls as you go. It doesn't really matter too much because we're going to be brushing out the curls a little bit at the end. Now that we've finished curling, we're going to take our comb and just lightly brush the bottom half of the curls. If you have an athlete whose hair does not like to hold a curl, I would recommend using a curl setting spray before you start the curling process. As you get better at the teasing process, you'll be able to find what works best for your athlete's hair. So give it a good hairspray all over, and there you have it. We have a teased ponytail ready for competition. Thanks for watching.